Seeing through the eyes of my father. Hi, this is Tom Doerflein Sr. here. I'm going to share part of my dad's story. If you know my dad or know about his story, it's pretty remarkable. He was a man who lost his sight around my age, around 51, and he lost his sight totally blind for almost 17 years. And one day when he was in prayer, actually trying to remember a prayer that my mom used to speak to him, he called out to the Lord and said, I want to see clearly. And after almost 17 years of darkness, brilliant, bright light and color came in, and 90 seconds later, he could see as clear as you and I. No more trifocals needed, 20/20 vision, total restoration. But along the path, there was a lot of learning and a lot of struggle, and here's part of that story. Okay, describe what it was like when you lost sight in your first eye.
When I first lost it, I found out that I had atrophy of the optic nerve. The eye itself started to blur, continued to get worse over a period of time, almost a year. I lost the first eye. It was not a very forgiving situation for me because it just blurred and caused all kinds of complications as far as driving, different things like that, because I still had one eye I could see with, and they didn't take my driver's license at that time.
So was it getting progressively blurrier, the first eye?
It continued to get progressively blurrier until it actually got to the point where it turned black, and that was the end. This took about close to a year's time for that to happen, maybe a little bit less. During that period of time, to drive, I had to use a patch because when it was blurry, because it would throw my vision off on the other eye.
Mm-hmm. So that one went out totally. It was black, and then was there a period of time that stabilized, or did you start losing sight in the other eye right away?
Once it went black, I continued to wear the patch during that period of time. Well, that's not true. After it did get black, I quit using the patch because it no longer interfered with the different light perception coming through the eye itself. Yeah. We're talking about over 21 years.
Yeah, ago.
So a little bit of this has been forgotten as far as the patch on the eye, but after it did go completely black and go out, I didn't have to use the patch anymore.
So after your first eye went out, was there time before your second one started to go out? Was there time in between? Do you remember?
There was probably about 10, 11 months in between that I found out from the doctor that the second eye was going to go out. I had started getting blurriness, but unlike the first eye, the second eye was sort of like a short circuit. It would come and go. I would lose my sight for maybe a few minutes, could be a few seconds. Then it progressed into days and weeks, but it would come back every time. During those periods of time, I was able to practice being blind. I learned different things like how to use a microwave, some of it with much frustration. My wife was out of town, and I knew how to set the buttons on the microwave because a were sort of indented, but right above where the start button was a cancel button. And I continued to hit the cancel button. I had a very cold meals that weekend when my wife was gone out of town. When she came back, we took care of it. A little piece of tape on the start button really helped things a lot. And that was just one of the little tricks that we learned over the period of time of being blind. Many more were learned from trial and error. When I could see, I tried to do different tasks so that I could learn how to do them. And when I would go blind, of course, go blind. When the blindness would come back, because it was short-circuiting, we would practice doing things to try to make it easier for me to navigate the house and just do different everyday chores that had to be done.
So when it was the second eye was going out, when it was intermittent, when it was out, was it black? Was it dark? Was it out?
It was complete blackness.
Like a light switch.
When it went out, just like, the basic way that the doctor explained it to me was, it's like you've got a lamp up here with a wire to it, and the wire is pulling loose. When it goes loose, you get blackness. Maybe sporadically a little light, but when it eventually went out, it was total darkness. But I never really had light perception once my optic nerves died, like a lot of people do. But I had what they call blindsightedness, which I could feel objects, which took a period of time to
learn,
practice and learn that.
Describe what it was like emotionally to lose sight in your second eye.
To lose the sight in my second eye was pretty hard. Being a sighted person and knowing everything around me, I was a very observant person when I could see. In some ways, it made it very hard to lose my sight. Knowing that I wouldn't see the people around me, the people I loved. At that time, we were having quite a few grandchildren. We had 4. And of course, not knowing how many more would be on the way, it turned out there were 4 more that I didn't see until I regained my sight. So not seeing these children and going through this period of time, it was a little hard not knowing what each little individual looked like. But they would allow me to touch their face and get an idea of what their little noses were shaped like, heads, different things, how curly their hair was or wasn't. That part was pretty hard. And just everyday life, going out, maybe looking at a flashy car, good-looking people, anything around you that you knew or thought you would never see again. On the other hand, it was sort of like a back and forth deal, because I was observant beforehand. It helped me, I think, make it through some of the toughest times because I was able to know what that tree looked like, a chair, unlike a lot of other blind people who have lost their sight at birth or before birth. So it was a mixed type thing. It's very hard to lose your sight and give up on things, but at the same time, if you were lucky enough, like I was, to have lived and been very observant about the things around you, in the end, it turned out not to be quite as bad as I expected.
How was it emotionally with your job? Like starting to lose sight in the second eye when then you realized, and the doctor said it's not coming, you're going to lose sight, you will be blind, and you knew that. Like with your job, what was that like emotionally?
Emotionally, it was very hard. It was, I'm not going to be able to do, the first thought was, I'm not going to be able to do this job anymore. How are we going to survive? I had started a company when I was 27 years old. And at this time, we're talking, I was blind for 17 years we had the company for a total of 46 years, but 17 years totally blind within that time, and not knowing how you were going to run this company. We did primarily residential work. I originally, before I started my company, I worked for another company for 7 years, and I did commercial work. And we prayed a lot, and we had a lot of people telling us, including the guy behind the camera here, that things would work out and we would work it out somehow. At the same time, my poor wife was going through all kinds of heck because her mother had Alzheimer's. And for her to be able to drive me to a job site, to be able to try figuring out how to measure it or anything else was just about an impossibility. Lo and behold, a couple people had asked us to do some commercial work. I ended up, over this period of time, seeing that we could do the commercial work because my wife could bid it online and we could have other people working. But to start off, I got the chore of starting it because a couple of our people were on vacation. That method seemed to work out pretty good. It changed the emotions a little bit because we were able to switch things over and finally, after quite a few years, start making a living again. I think emotionally, it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, is to pick up the pieces and start all over.
Okay, so when you went blind, totally blind, senses changed, right? So there's a lot about motion and feeling things around you. Talk a little bit about that.
I think when I went totally blind, my eyes were closed and I'm not being distracted by anything, fortunate or unfortunate. My wife was driving along the expressway and I'm sort of edging away from the door to get towards the center of the car, and she said, "What is your problem? And I said, there's something outside the door, and it feels really close. And she says, that's the barrier along the highway. Well, it didn't help things. It still felt very close. And it bothered me quite a bit. That was one of the things I felt. As time went on, we learned there would be other things. I could walk up to a building. I would feel the hardness of the building in front of me. I could eventually pick out where a window or a door was on that building, because it was like, in my system, a weak spot. It felt different. And I would point it out, and she says, where's a window or a door, whatever. And
could you see
this
it? Could you see it?
Progressively worked into the woods, a tree, a trunk of a tree. I could feel it. I could eventually feel the small branches of the tree, which helped immensely because I knew there was a tree there. And I had visioned trees before when I could see. I can't tell you how much this helped me with my blindness as far as progressing and moving forward. It was probably one of the most important things that could have happened. It got to the point where we were driving one night to my daughter's house, and I could feel something in the woods right before you get to the street to turn off to her street. And I could feel something coming through it. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't figure it out. I thought, is it a kid, a bike, whatever? Turned out, right as we got up to it, and it was ready to come out onto the street in front of us, I yelled, "Stop." And my wife said, what crazy person listens to a blind person tell them to slam their brakes on right then and there? But she did. It was a deer. It ran right in front of the car. If I hadn't told her that, we would have hit the deer.
Was it night or day? Was it nighttime or daytime?
It was nighttime. But I could feel it moving. I could feel this object moving through the woods. And I didn't know if it was a person, a bicycle, a deer, whatever. After that, we started practicing. I watched for deer when she drove and see if I could feel anything. And it happened more than one time that there were deer alongside the road, and I was able to tell her about them. Things that she would not see in the dark that I felt. So as far as motion, I don't know. In my own mind, I'm a firm believer that when you're not seeing things, you're not wasting your energy, and you've picked up a different energy that is helping you make it through life. And I think God has really given me somewhat of a gift. I can still feel that today. If we're driving along, I watch for the deer. Now I can watch with my eyes and without them, but then it was without them.
Yeah, yeah. So you feel different energy. So one of the things, the gifts that you have, and when we think about senses, it's hard to describe what a sense is, but feeling electric That is, I think of a balloon on my hair and I put it on my arm. I can feel a little bit. But your sense of feeling that type of energy is different. So
I can be in the middle of a building, no windows, and I can feel a tingling sensation and tell you it's lightning outside. And someone could go out and confirm that. I first noticed this sensation going past the WLW Tower up by Tylersville. It puts out a lot of voltage, and the feeling from that is very similar to lightning that you feel on your skin. When I first noticed this, I mentioned it to my wife, and she says, "You sure you can feel that?" "Yeah, I'm sure." And she went past it quite a few times afterwards and said, I can feel it too. But I think it's something where we're not as observant of our own beings and what's happening around us until something happens to you that causes you to be more observant and to realize that there's more than just traffic going past you. I think that we kind of tune into our bodies when we're not using all our energy or distractions. I look at sight as a distraction. A good one, but I mean, at the same time, I know that I could do much better blind, and I'm sure it was because I didn't have the distractions that I do today.
Okay, when we talk about senses, one of them is a sense of touch and another is a sense of sight. Talk about feeling color.
An easy subject. I had about 7, maybe 8 shirts, not the same as this one, but all different colors. I once was able to touch the shirt, and I noticed that there's a different feel to different colors. They were all the same shirt, but they were all different colors. I could feel the texture was different, and of course I didn't know when I touched it that it was red, blue, purple, whatever. My wife went through it with me, and she would tell me, "This is your blue shirt," or "This is your yellow," or red. And I was able to tell the difference between the fabric and what it felt like as far as the color was concerned. And I practiced at it quite a bit. I was able to dress myself in the morning, didn't have to have my wife tell me what color shirt I was going to wear that day because I already knew. I picked it out myself.
Had to be nice. You had to be nice, and otherwise she might tell you the wrong one to put on, maybe.
She might tell me which one to put on, and I may have listened a time or two.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I did have the choice myself because I could tell which one I had. They didn't all feel the same, but she was very instrumental in helping me with that as far as telling me what the colors were so I could differentiate. Having a carpet store, that came in handy because I was able to pick out. A person would walk up to me and say, "Gee, we're looking for a blue carpet," and my wife would be standing behind me, seeing me walk over to the wall and start running my hands through the samples. And I said, "A blue like this?" And much to her amazement, most of the time I was right. We didn't do too much of that because we did commercial sales, and we really didn't have people after I went blind coming into the store too often. But I was able to pick that up with the shirts. Much easier to do it with the same fabric all the time, but I was able to pick it up on some different fabrics and pretty much be right most of the time. It was a sensation that I never expected to have.
Can you describe the sensation, like texture? What do you mean, like it has a different texture?
Well, one might be a little bit more rough. One might feel really smooth. Like if you touched a yellow is really smooth, soft, softer than the other colors. Not just in your mind as you think of yellow, but when you touch it, it felt smoother.
What would like a dark blue or black feel like?
A dark blue or a black I could get mixed up easily.
Okay. Yeah, but or just
the
like
two,
a dark
the
color.
two of them,
Yeah.
I could usually pick out the blue because it felt a little different. The black, a little bit more harsh, a little more coarse, rugged, like me. Anyhow.
Okay. So you were doing this with fabric. Did that transfer? I think that transferred over to other things. Like you could do fabric, but then
I could do fabrics, but then I couldn't always tell colors in smoother products. But I could tell a little bit. On some products, I could tell if they were blue or really something definite. I had a hard time on my daughter's ceramic tile. She had a blend of oranges and yellows and different things, all into a room where I had installed it, but fortunately all the colors were the same and they were all supposed to go together.
Right.
Otherwise I probably would have been in trouble. With my fingertips, I could read papers off of our copying machine. I never learned Braille. I didn't have time. The people around me, like this guy here and my wife, just kept me moving, whether it was playing Frisbee or whatever. There was always something going on in my life. And the person who was going to teach me Braille moved to Dayton, Ohio.
So you used a resource, the library. Say a little bit more about the library. What did you?
On the library, I was in my office one day. I picked up a Cincinnati Bell telephone book. I noticed the print was raised. I ran my hands across it. I could read it. Inquisitive, I had to call the Cincinnati Library. I asked the person there if they had any raised print. And says, no, we don't have any raised print, but we used to. This was how people who were blind would read books years ago, until Braille became like a universal language for blind people. And I thought, it's interesting, because after that, I started practicing a little bit. I had notebook paper, and I would print hard on it so that I would have indentations, because I didn't really have a way of raising the print.
Right.
And I was able to read that. And after quite a bit of practice, my wife could write letters to me, whatever, or instructions on things that she needed done that day. And I could easily follow them. It was great. A great adaptation. Anyhow, so as time went on, I kept practicing with my fingers, trying to read this. I was able to do it with the indentations, but then eventually we found out that our printer raised the print slightly on the paper. By this time, my calluses were gone from my fingertips, which just about made it impossible to identify anything. I could feel that there was something in the lines of print, but I couldn't make out the letters and different things.
So when your calluses start to go,
my fingers softened.
They softened, and so what does it feel like to read with your fingers? Like, all right, so that's not normal. Like, most people don't do that.
I'll tell you what, for a person like me, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to advance a little bit forward. After I got my sight back, my wife walked into the room one night, and I'm supposed to be reading this book. And actually I was, but at the same time, I'm running my fingers across the print. It became just like another way of life. I could read with my fingertips as easy as you could look at a book and read it.
Right.
And I was doing both at the same time. Talk about being ambidextrous.
Wait, so when you did both at the same time when your sight came on. So when you were blind and reading with your hands, did it matter if the light was on, off, if you were looking at the text or not? So that,
It didn't matter. It was just a feel. And I think the reason that it was so easy to do it when I was blind was because my fingertips were soft again, and everything was completely dark. I had no sight whatsoever, and it was easy to concentrate. I had no distractions unless someone would come into the room and start talking to me. Otherwise, there weren't any distractions, so being able to concentrate at a much more concentrated form, it was much easier to read a book and run with my fingertips and with my sight not being there.
So how did that translate to, like, so you had this sensitivity with your hands to be able to feel that. Were there other things that you could feel? I know we talked about color in a different segment, but were there other things you could feel? Like, I know you talked about, like, tile and were there things that you could
I could feel the graining in tile. I could feel the graining in tile.
So what's
I could
that
feel
mean?
the color.
What's graining in tile? What's that mean?
Like a VCT tile,
yeah.
And most VCT tiles they're quarter turned. If you look at any commercial building,
right.
I had to learn how to do that blind. I could feel the grain. The grain primarily goes one way in a VCT tile.
Yeah.
So when you are putting it down, just a quarter turn it is just a matter, but it's a matter of use your other hand, go back, double check it, make sure you didn't make a mistake.
Because if you made one mistake, you could be off.
If you made one mistake, it would go through the whole tile. Everything could be off. It could be 15 pieces, it could be 50.
So how did you learn it? How did you learn how to do that? Just automatically just knew right away how to do it? Or did you have help at first?
Like I said before, I was very inquisitive, and
did mom check you?
Your mom, did show me how to put the tiles down to begin with. Actually, she was showing me with the chalk line and the lines. We used wax pencils, different things to get the straight line. And then I told her, you don't have to keep showing me that. I can feel the grain in the tile.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was eventually, we had a job that was almost 2,000 square feet that had to go down, and we had employees that were not going to be back in time to get it started. I had to start it. Your mother put the lines down for me. I started it. I put almost probably well over 1,000 feet of it down and did it in the way it should have been done.
That's amazing. So how did blindness impact your energy level, your focus, that type of thing?
I would say quite a bit. I would read a book when I was sighted, and a lot of times I would get tired and doze off. When I was reading a book with my fingertips and not having any distractions, any sight around, I could just about go through a medium-sized book without stopping. It would be that interesting to me because I had more concentration on what I was doing. I honestly think your eyes really distract you in the things that you're doing. Not a bad thing. I like to be distracted once in a while. But at the same time, as far as fulfilling any obligations or different things that you had to do, when I would read contracts, I could read them much easier when I was blind than I can right now.
Yeah. So growing up, we went camping a lot. We were outdoors a lot. You did work inside, work outside. So how did blindness impact your, I don't know, what could you do? What could you do when you were outside in nature? You know, and what could you feel or?
Okay. We would go to places like the Gorge, Smokies, different things like that. And I could feel the trees. It sort of goes back like to the blind-sightedness that I have, where I can feel window openings in buildings and doors. I can feel the same thing in the outdoors as far as rock cliffs. I may not know exactly how dangerous each rock cliff was, but I could appreciate it. And I was usually with someone that I didn't have to worry about doing something really foolish. I could feel the trees. I could feel an opening if it was a cave.
So I remember when we were at like an overlook. If we were at an overlook,
I could feel the vastness.
You could feel out, like you would ask, is there a rock face over this direction, or you know, that type of thing? Is there a cave on that? I remember you asking those questions.
And I could feel like depth, like it was going down, not something solid, and in front of me if it were like in a gorge type area.
Eyes closed, eyes open. Did you have to have your eyes open or closed or?
Closed. Yeah. It didn't matter if I had them closed or open. I couldn't see anything anyhow.
Yeah.
But you know,
you said a bird.
I still do this today. I close my eyes sometimes when I really want to concentrate. And at that time, I didn't have to do that. It was my eyes just didn't see. But I could hear the hearing. At that time, I could actually hear. Not like today where the ears are getting a little older, but I could hear the birds, people around me, just simply, I enjoyed it, I think, to a different degree when I was blind. I think there was some peacefulness to it. I think even though you couldn't see the things around you vividly, you could visualize them because of past experiences. It could be a cloudy day, and I loved it because I loved the clouds. I loved the thunder, the things around me. I guess I was just an observant type person who could feel the things around me, whether it be a tree, a rock cliff, a gorge type situation. I can remember when we went to the gorge going down, what was it, 100 steps?
Yeah, there were a lot, a bunch.
There was a lot of steps. I couldn't do that today because I couldn't walk it.
Yeah, could use
but I really wasn't afraid to do that because I knew I had something to hold on to. And
you lost
and I just felt like everything around me was peaceful to me.
Yeah. What kept you positive or motivated through times of darkness or depression?
Being able to achieve things. For one, being able to read my own contracts for our business. It would be pleasure, going out and playing a Frisbee game, being able to keep my same handicap that I had before. Before I lost my sight, the thought of your mother rattling the change or you and me throwing the Frisbee in the basket and sort of laughing to myself, thinking, I bet you they're diving out of the way. Different things like that. It just, I guess, a sense of achievement, trying to adapt to many, many different things that I never thought would ever work out. And I think that was because of having people around me with a positive attitude that, you know, hey, Dad, this is not a death sentence or anything. It's just a problem, and we'll deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we did. And I guess it was that we would adapt one way, and then sometimes a week later, some other adaptation would come up that might be better doing the same thing. It just was like God set the things in front of me and said, choose your direction. And most of the time, fortunately, I chose the right direction.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he gave me a little push there, helping me out.
Probably. Yeah. So people who are going through really hard times, that it could be emotional or physical or other things, you know, it's like you had yourself around people who are pushing you or motivating you and that you're positive. You had people around you. Like, is there any words of wisdom for people listening to you here? Like, you've been through a lot and you came out on the other side. What would be helpful to others, do you think?
I think the best thing to do is listen to the people around you. listen to their suggestions, get your own ideas, and think about it. At least try some of the suggestions and see what works best for you. Maybe that particular suggestion or idea even that you came up with won't work right, and maybe something better will come up. I think the whole thing is to keep on trying and try to be like a wheel, just keep moving and do the things that you think are going to help you the best. Pray.
And pray. Yeah, I was going to say, how is God part of that equation? How is he part of
Without
you?
God, I would never have made it. I have my friends. I have myself. God's the one who put the materials in front of me and helped me with the wisdom to choose the right ones.
Thanks for watching this long video. It was really uncut video from an interview with my dad about a year ago. Today marks 6 years that my dad's sight was restored. He had optic nerve atrophy. His optic nerves were dead, and now they're alive. He was blind, and now he can see, and there's really no medical explanation. I'm very thankful for this miracle. I believe God was listening when he called out to him, and his sight came back at one moment in both eyes, even though he lost his sight in 2 eyes at different times. So I'm very thankful for my dad, his perseverance, and for God's gracious act of kindness in restoring his sight in his perfect timing.